good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Y-Whales, wherever in the world you are today. So it is June 26, 2024. Bitcoin has had a relatively rough week. It's sitting right around 62. Summer's been really kind of quiet for the most part around, a lot of developments around, cryptocurrencies, blockchain technologies and whatnot. That being said, it is the hot button issue right now growing in the presidential debate here in the United States. So what we're quite simply seeing is very fast and rapid approaching regulation towards blockchain related projects, which is great. Hey, we're here. We've been waiting for years for something like FIT21, which is just making its way through the House and Congress. I don't believe that the current administration will support this, but it shows a good sign that we do have support in Congress for later administrations to hopefully be able to give us clear guidelines on how to play by the rules. This would be very similar to MiCA and MiCAR in the EU, which is just tell us the rules of the game. We're happy to make sure that fraud and all the very bad things around financial technologies are regulated away, which is, about consumer protection. That being said, one of the most amazing projects that we've been following for quite a while is Membrane. And so I'm here right now with Carson and James, and really want to do a deep dive today to understand this merging between traditional financial institutions and blockchain technologies. And I feel based on, kind of the history of where Membrane was, it has not yet come to market, coming very soon, that we really want to understand what this next generation of fintech technologies looks like. That being said, let's take a second and make sure we understand who we're speaking with today. Carson, please help us out with kind of like where you came from, and all the battles you had to deal with to get here today.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. So I'm Carson Cook. I'm founder and CEO of Membrane Labs. My background is tech. I started in academia, PhD in physics, master's in electrical engineering. During that time, got into the trading space and ultimately joined McKinsey following graduation. Did about 3.5 years in banking, fintech, financial services. Saw a lot of the things that work really well in traditional finance, a lot of the things that don't work at all in traditional finance. Following McKinsey, January 2018, left full-time into crypto. My first foray was with a firm called Fractal. Not the fractals you're hearing about today. There's a number of them now in crypto, but we were prop trading, market making, and really initially was just looking at arbitrage and sort of the very segmented marketplace that still exists today, but existed in spades in the 2017, 2018 timeframe. That kind of position gave me a lot of fodder to go build products because I saw how many things aren't working properly from a tech perspective and just a market structure perspective across the crypto space. So following Fractal, I launched a protocol called Tokamak, which is about to launch a brand new platform called Autopilot this summer. And then also, of course, Membrane, which we're here to talk about today, which is really trying to fix really all crypto operations, settlement, collateral management, lending, derivatives, trading workflows, in particular for OTC and an institutional grade level.
Yeah, and there's a ton of questions I have about the relationship between those two projects, but we'll get to those here in a minute. James, same question. Kind of really help us understand your background and what led you to what you're working on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, Jay. So I was an undergraduate at Harvard, also have an MBA from Wharton, from Penn. I started my career at Goldman Sachs. I was there for around 11 years, trading, sales, spent some time in the executive office with leadership on strategy. In 2016, became, I think the right word is obsessed with blockchain technology and cryptocurrency, began investing as an angel, was affiliated with a venture capital firm called Distributed Global, and ultimately took the leap, left Goldman, as I said, and joined a handful of companies in the space, one being Ripple, the other Manai Financial Group, and ultimately landed at Galaxy, where I ran their global business development efforts and was on the management committee. And while there, one of the investments we had made was into a protocol called Tokamak, and I was able to meet Carson and really became enamored with the goal actually of Membrane, but in addition to Tokamak, where had really given my experience in traditional finance and seeing the struggles, the trials and tribulations of trying to run a markets business at Galaxy, really believed in what Membrane was building and the role it could serve for institutions in their goals to access cryptocurrencies. And so here we are.
Fabulous. So let's help me understand a little bit from your guys' perspectives. I spend a lot of time in the TradFi space. Went to every single conference that they would dare send me to last year, including Money 2020 and a variety of others. But help me understand, because there is centuries of financial literacy that is being utilized in the current markets. There's decades of financial technologies that have been up and running since the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Some of Swift is still running on dial-up modems. But really help me understand, because there is a lot of people like helping to adapt Swift to do other things. But really, and James, I want to start with you because you did mention it. Why blockchain? Why do you feel that we need to take this entire massive infrastructure that runs the world's economies and move it over to this new technology?
Yeah, I'll try to do little philosophizing from a political standpoint, and move more to a technological one, because I came at the space more from a libertarian background, in the sense that why should we have politicians determining money supply, and why not have that kind of written in a ledger? I thought that was very cool, something immutable, something that couldn't change. So that's simple. Then there's also interesting applications on the voting side, and being able to kind of, from a decentralized perspective, kind of manage those processes. But from the financial market standpoint, I think seeing the instantaneous settlement, I think, is just the biggest unlock there. Mm-hmm. Where, you had mentioned Swift and other kind of archaic value transfer protocols, where something like a blockchain can quite simply enable a multitude of folks to agree on a shared set of truths and transfer value almost instantaneously. And that has tremendous ramifications for the broader financial markets in terms of transferring any type of asset, anything linked to a complex financial transaction. All of that can live and breathe on new rails, where money can move very quickly and be highly transparent, mind you. Mm-hmm. Whereas Swift is kind of operating in the shadows, so to speak, run in more of an oligopolistic sort of structure. The transparency that blockchain provides, counter to what a lot of people discuss in the markets around, who's using the technology. The transparency really kind of blew me away, in terms of the ledger is wide open. Everyone can read it. Everyone can agree on the details, and there's really nothing to argue about. So that's that in a nutshell. And we can elaborate on that, but those are kind of a couple of the key core highlights that I'd start with.
I love it. Carson, would you like to add anything, kind of to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with everything James said. Just to add a few things, I think something that's really interesting about what blockchains enable in the financial markets is that both they expand, they enable expansion into new markets. So this is, things like tokenization, securitization of things, but they also can improve each and every existing market. And I think often the first things that will happen is go into new markets. But even if you take equities and you look at all the infrastructure built around that, it works today, but there's so many inefficiencies, so many middlemen. So I think that the ability to settle assets in a much more streamlined and logical fashion, improve transparency, and just knock out middlemen, or make sure that middlemen are at least value add. I think just increasing the transparency of what's happening throughout the stack or the life cycle of a financial transaction is something that's very important that cryptocurrencies and blockchains enable. The other thing, maybe at a little higher level, is I think just the ability for global access and more people throughout the world to have kind of individual sovereignty over their financial life, I think is really important. And that's something that really gets me out of bed in the morning working in the space.
That's amazing. So kind of adding a little bit to this, you're convinced, I'm convinced, there's everyone that's pretty much watching this is relatively convinced that the world's moving to, a blockchain based, ecosystem. This is, everything can interact much better. The days of these APIs, is going to kind of dissipate a little bit, per se. But why hasn't it happened yet? I mean, James, you've been in the space since 2016. Carson, I didn't hear exactly when you entered, fully. I've been around since 2010, and every year it's like, this is the year. This is when it's going to happen. To start with, Carson, what do you think is the number one thing holding back? Is it the technology, or is it something else?
Yeah. So taking a step back and maybe answering this slightly different way, I think the whole crypto industry is stuck in a weird sort of backward looking spiral. And I think that all is because we have this very advanced technology, but all the operations surrounding that technology are broken. I would say completely broken. Crypto operations are broken. So if you look at Twitter, right, it's all filled with discussions of like, what part of the cycle are we in? And, oh, is this DeFi summer? And how is this part different than last time? And how is this part similar to last time? Everyone's sort of looking backward, which is a very strange state to be in an industry that's supposed to be looking forward. Yeah. So I think when you see positive market movements, even that's met with a pretty tepid reaction. People are still thinking about Three Arrows, or thinking about FTX Alameda, all of these things. And so all of those things, if you kind of get down to the issues surrounding them, it wasn't the actual blockchain. Blockchain and digital assets haven't failed us. It's really centralization, lack of risk management, uncollateralized lending, all of these different things that are really operations surrounding blockchain. And so as I look at all of those things, I think that's one of the largest reasons that crypto and blockchain hasn't been adapted, is that the surrounding infrastructure, surrounding operations that are required to run these things and that have been built over tens of years or even 100 years plus, if you look at just sort of broader processes in traditional finance, those don't exist in crypto. We have this amazing shiny piece of technology, but we haven't really figured out how to sort of connect the dots for that back to, I would say, either individuals or institutions. Certainly institutions, but even individuals, it's pretty challenging for them to interact with it.
Yeah. And James, just kind of on a slightly similar note, is there any major, innovations, any major, is there any technology gap, obviously membrane, but is there any major, we just don't have this yet, so there's no way for TradFi to start using this yet?
Yeah, I think you make, so in addition to what Carson had said, I would say that one of the things that's missing is, with any technology, even self-driving cars, I think, when we look at that, I mean, we've been talking about, that was 2 years away, 2 years ago, that was, 2 years away, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Everything happens slower than one would like. I think a lot of people look at blockchain and they extrapolate all the way to the future. And the truth is that we're not quite there yet. There's a lot of middleware and there's a significant amount of the technology stack that still needs to be built. Yeah. So I do think that's definitely a part of it. And if we think about Web 2.0 or where we are in Web today, there's been so much abstraction that's been built on top that it makes it very easily and readily accessible for the layperson, which is one of the things that I think has been a challenging place for crypto to be in the sense that it's not easy, it's not tactile, it's not as accessible as these other technologies that frankly took decades to build upon and get to where we are today. So I think there's simple things around tooling and making it, not necessarily for the hardcore developer to be able to build and extrapolate on top of the existing technologies we have. I also think that for the existing banks, kind of one, regulation has obviously held them back from just holding cryptocurrency, from being kind of a part of the ecosystem from a capital weighting standpoint. It's just it's far too draconian for the banks to actually get involved from a regulatory standpoint. So we still need to let that evolve. Yep. But even from a technological standpoint, the bits and components and parts that would need to fit into their methodologies and their systems and their and the way in which they do business today, that's just not quite there yet. There hasn't been enough tooling around that to make it accessible for those folks to be able to build on top and to be able to create rule sets that are in compliance with where markets are today from a regulatory standpoint, from just market standards and norm standpoint. So I think I know that was very abstract, but I do think we're still kind of waiting for additional
directions.
Yeah, exactly. We're still kind of waiting.
Yeah. And so that really does, to me, it links up very heavily with early Web 1. Whereas I just remember the days of the technology and I'm probably a little older than the two of you guys. But it's like what could you even do with it? What was it even for? And the technology was, it was all about what browser you're using. It was all about, what server software or mail software you're using. And now nobody even knows. Like nobody's saying like, I'm not going to use this website. It's built on Azure. I only use S3 websites. Like, and we're still in that really fanboyish type era. But as we kind of roll into exactly what we're here to chat about today, Carson, where does Membrane, kind of fit into the TradFi stack? What is it really replacing or enhancing? And how does it help towards that adoption cycle?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So I mentioned earlier that sort of crypto is very backwards looking right now, and that my hypothesis here is that this is predominantly because of all of the operations surrounding the blockchain, not the blockchain itself. All of the kind of the past failures have been because we put these wrappers around things and then done that in a incomplete call it way. So I think the biggest thing here that we're trying to solve with Membrane is fix those operational complexities or really just failed operations in the space. So if you really boil it down, Membrane is operational software, workflow software for cryptocurrencies that really can bring crypto properly into the 21st century across institutional grade settlement, collateral management, lending, derivatives, and OTC transactions. Something that kind of permeates all of this is OTC transactions, or over-the-counter transactions. This means one institution facing another institution without an exchange in the middle. And if you kind of look in other markets, take FX, for example, a huge amount of the volume goes through OTC markets as opposed to something like an exchange.
Yep.
Crypto, not the case, and predominantly because you don't have sort of this operational management or workflow management tooling and software, and that's really what we're trying to enable with Membrane here.
Before we start on our next topic, here's something really exciting. Everyone struggles with these really highly complex, intricate Ethereum names. ENS has a solution that's really game-changing for you. Revolutionizing your digital identity with ENS. Transform long, complex Ethereum name addresses into easy-to-remember names, safely, securely, and uniquely yours. Visit ens.app to get started today, and ENS welcomes you to the new internet. So really interesting. So again, it's just walk me through. So most of the institutions have, obviously a fiduciary responsibility for counterparty risk. They got to be OFAC compliant. They got to make sure that like their assets are real, and that they're not trading with any known or potential terrorist type things. So is that kind of where you fit in the tech stack, is to provide that assurity that what they're doing is known as much as possible?
Yeah, so that's a piece of it. When I say sort of operations, predominantly where we sit is I like to call Membrane hi-fi. We're not exactly DeFi, we're not CeFi, we're somewhere in the middle, hi-fi or
Okay.
hybrid finance. What that means is if I'm an institution, I'm making a bunch of decisions about where and how I custody assets, where and how I execute. Membrane is sort of the settlement network or glue that links those things together. So
Gotcha.
if we launch a new desk, we might decide, hey, we're gonna custody at these 2 qualified custodians, plus we're gonna have Fireblocks and other MPC, and then we want to actually execute over at Coinbase or various exchanges. Membrane can manage all of the obligations and liabilities based on trading and lending activity with other desks, with other exchanges, et cetera, and then sort of orchestrate all the movements of funds, collateral management, et cetera, interest payments for loans between all those different pieces. So that's kind of why we call it hybrid finance, and that it's a network of these things interconnected by the blockchain. Not all running just in smart contracts like DeFi are, which is frankly quite challenging or intimidating to institutions, but also not CeFi, where it's just park all of your funds at FTX and hope for the best. Something that institutions can manage, and that frankly they have significant problems managing if they don't have the operational infrastructure that Membrane affords.
Yeah, the other thing, Jay, if you don't mind, that I think is novel about Membrane's approach is that in traditional finance, typically when you think about front, middle, and back office, where front office is executing trades, they're agreeing to trade details with a counterparty. Okay, that gets matched. It then moves down into a reconciliation process where the middle office is agreeing on the details, and then the back office is responsible for pushing the actual wire or the money movement kind of out in accordance with the transaction details. Now, in traditional finance, that's highly specialized, and each one of those operates on different systems. You might have an internal booking system, within a particular bank, for example, all the way down to needing to interact with SWIFT or the Fedwire and some other kind of money movement rails. What is different about and unique about Membrane is that all of that is vertically integrated into the stack. So on the front office side, you can agree with your counterparty on our system to trade details. And it can be as complex as a complex derivative, or it can be a loan that has collateral attached to it. And each side can see the full details regardless of where they custody. And at the same time, all the way down to the actual money movements, because we're integrated with all of the custodians and the various places where one would keep cryptocurrency and digital assets in general, we also can initiate the transfer inside of Membrane. So it's all the way down to the settlement portion of the stack. And the way we kind of see it, one of the additional answers that I forgot to include in the last question is we also think cost is a big prohibitive factor for folks to enter into this market in terms of you got to learn new programming languages. You got to hire specified folks that have specific expertise in order to actually adopt this brand new technology. What we've done is we've abstracted away the need to connect with a disparate group of technologies, i.e. custodians or exchanges and other venues that each have their own idiosyncratic APIs. There's no standardization there. And we're able to integrate that into a single place where it makes it a lot easier to touch, feel, and smell the ecosystem rather than having to build all that tooling on your own.
No, that is a huge, Carson, you spent the time at McKinsey doing the financial technology stuff. Like, banks can love it, but if it doesn't fit into what they're already working on today, then it's just like, nope, put it in the pile and everything else. So the fact that you guys have multiple integrations, I think, the best thing is I just want to see, if you guys don't mind, jumping into the demo. I think that will give us a lot of talking points, as well as the viewers will kind of be able to follow along because, listen, it is a quadrillion-dollar industry that you guys are in. So, even if you get 0.01% of trades going through this, that's tens to hundreds of trillions of dollars potentially to be moving through your systems. And while I believe that blockchain will over time absorb 80 to 90% of all traditional assets, finance, capital, everything, it is today not a safer system in any way, shape, or form. You click on one wrong link, and next thing you know, poof, everything blows up. So I'm really excited to kind of see how you guys are managing this from, again, that enterprise grade, institutional grade, piece of technology. So with that, James, I will be quiet and let you go.
Absolutely. Happy to share with you and the community. So here you can see kind of what we call our home screen, and this is for a single kind of institutional entity. You can set up parent and child relationships, sub accounts. A vast number of entity structures are available so that you can represent your entire organization. And in addition, keep in mind that what you're seeing here, your customers or your counterparties will also see their own views. So this is useful if you think of it as a white labeled solution where not only are you using this as an end user, but it's a customer portal that you can provide to your clients that will all exist in this UI so that each side has a single source of truth. This is also fully available via API. So to the extent you have a custom workflow or you just want to use a portion of the system, it's highly modular. So everything is meant to be kind of accessed at a, go at your own pace. And so that's how this UI is just one single expression of of a numerous number of use cases that one could use Membrane for. And so if I scroll down, we can see here the various accounts that I've connected, and you have the ability to kind of drill down into the assets. Nothing kind of revolutionary here per se, except to say that we connect with a multitude of most of the major custodial providers, both from a regulated custody perspective, so the Coinbases and Bitgos of the world, as well as their associated networks like the Go Network or Copper Clearloop. As well as exchanges. So, here you have Deribit, we have Coinbase Prime and Coinbase Exchange account, and then hardware and software wallets. So we support MetaMask, we support Ledger. This is just to give you a sense to the variety of potential accounts that we can support. And so all of this is kind of what I would call the cockpit of where treasury management can take place. And so regardless of where you or your counterparty is holding funds, you have the ability to settle in a straight through processed manner any type of transfer or any type of money movement that one would want. So, here is an example of being able to set up a new transfer of funds where, for example, if you're on our network, very quite simply, you can select your counterparty, you can select the currencies the particular transactions that you want. These are associated with custom trades. But the idea is that you're booking spot trades, you're booking loans, you're booking complex derivatives, and all of these trades are funneling down into this settlement repository where you can select a subset or you can select all of the transactions that have funneled down for a single counterparty. And you have the ability to settle them instantaneously in the platform. So this is an example of a Uniswap settlement. And now I can simply select the network. And you can do this for a variety of different types of transactions. And I create a draft settlement. And now all of a sudden, I quite easily, regardless of where my counterparty is holding their funds, I can select it from any one of my various custodial providers or exchanges or hot wallets or hardware wallets. And I can select that account. And then I can also select a destination address that's been pre-populated from my address book, which I'll get into in a second, where here I can create a whitelist on a per currency basis, on a per entity basis, where I want to be able to send funds. So, if you think about this from a compliance perspective, I'm understanding the addresses to which I'm sending, or I can send that out to a counterparty and have them pre-populate their own address. So in this world now, where we're exchanging information via Telegram, via, frankly, email, all of this is secure, and there's a easy way to exchange, transfer information, so that when I drill down into the transfer level, I can simply go ahead and let me find a better one here. Exactly. So here's an example. Once I've committed a settlement to the settlement engine, now I can see the two transactions. Here's AVAX is being moved from a Fireblocks account, and I can go. Oh, I haven't populated the destination address here. Let me see if I can get a better one. I can go ahead and sign a particular transaction. In this example, it's the net settlement of ETH, and now all of a sudden my Fireblocks window pops up. I can commit to this transaction. Unfortunately, we don't have this, rather embarrassing that we don't have enough funds in our account, but I'm sure we could move enough ETH into this account, but we're getting, kind of the error handling here. But we have the ability to move those funds instantaneously all through, the Membrane, suite. And so what's exciting about that is that you can go into the front end of this technology and book a incredibly complex loan that has, for example, here's an open term loan that we've booked that has a significant number of interest payments and principal disbursements, and it can get as complex as you want, complex derivatives, and all of that flows down into the simple settlement, settlement repository, and money can be moved instantaneously. So if you think about it at a large institution, if you're dealing with hundreds of trades throughout the day, whether it's spot, loans, or derivatives, all of that is being tracked, monitored, and it's straight through processed all the way down to our settlement engine. And everything is handled from a middle and back office perspective, with 100% certainty, with a significant amount of security. And, you're really kind of revolutionizing the process of settling those transactions.
Again, amazing just to kind of watch this, and it's been a while since I've seen this demo, and you guys have come a long way. Just real quick, what chains are you guys on? Are you ETH based for now?
No, ETH, Solana, AVAX,
Bitcoin, Litecoin.
Bitcoin, obviously, Litecoin. Yeah, sorry. Just trying to get.
Yeah, pretty much all the, sorry to jump in, but pretty much all the major ones. And the nice thing is
Okay.
we, like when a client requests a new one, we usually have that up within a week. We have a large development team, and we also run our own nodes generally,
Okay.
so that for the broadcasting of the transactions, we're able to monitor that and then report back in the front end sort of when these things are actually blocked in. So the goal here is to kind of have everything be cross-chain, cross-custodial, a chain agnostic, custody agnostic settlement network, which you kind of seen here. And the really important thing then is if you compare that to a normal flow, like James was saying, of Telegram today, like usually you're sending public addresses, then you're sending test transactions, all these things. So many opportunities for man-in-the-middle attacks, so many opportunities for fat finger mistakes, things like that. Here, both sides are configuring sort of a settlement proposal and then enacting the settlement, all while not bypassing, in fact, enhancing security. So when James brought up that ability where he was selecting slow, medium, fast for gas and then sending, had he finished that, it would actually jump over to Fireblocks on his phone or gone into 2FA and biometrics if he's using Coinbase. So all these things connect directly into the custodial world, don't bypass it. So Membrane never actually initiates the transfer. It still goes through those, and we're not doing the moves themselves. And last thing I'd say, just kind of on what you've just seen, as James said, all the complexity, whether you're doing this with just a simple payment, or if you're doing an OTC trade, or if you're doing a loan or derivative or collateral management, margin calls, interest payments, all this stuff feeds into the same netting and settlement engine. So he might have selected 40 different obligations that come from 15 different complex financial transactions between two desks. All those things can get netted down to the fewest number of blockchain moves, and then actually fed into the settlement engine.
So, okay, lots of questions now. What are you able to cross swaps across chain? So somebody has an asset they want to on Ethereum and they want to buy something on Solana. Are you doing atomic swaps, or how are you managing the cross chain?
Yeah, great question. I'll take that one first. So there's a couple ways you can do it here. You can book this as an OTC spot trade, and probably in a minute we can show this when we also go into kind of collateral management, lending, and spot. Okay. You can book this as a delayed settlement spot trade. So you could do AVAX in exchange for ETH. Those inherently are on two different chains, but you could book that as a ticket between two parties, and then that would flow through to the obligations that need to flow the two different directions. So you can do that. Often institutions are facing other desks that they trust, and frankly, they don't care if the funds transfer at different times. That said, we offer other choices in how you manage the settlement. So you can do sort of traditional settlement where you send to me, and then maybe 3 hours later, I send to you. You have the Herstat or the counterparty risk in that case. You can also do something called smart settlement or subatomic settlement. We have these two other options within the system. Subatomic, we actually have a patent on. Smart settlement uses a system of smart contracts plus delay functions on UTXOs like Bitcoin. So you can still book a trade like I was mentioning, but then you can line up or coordinate the movements of funds. So even though it's cross-chain, you can still minimize, let's call it, any of the counterparty risks. The only reason I say minimize is if you had a counterparty you really didn't trust, they might try to front run it on the chain or something like that. That's on the smart settlement side. On the subatomic settlement side, if it's in a supported custodian or wallet, we can actually remove the counterparty risk without need for a smart contract. The way you do that is you coordinate the instance that the transactions are actually broadcast out to the blockchain. So if I owe you USDC and you owe me ABC token, we can actually make sure that like when one of us signs, Membrane sort of gets the signed, the ready to broadcast signed transaction packet. Not the actual funds, but just the packet that's ready to be broadcast, and then waits until Carson, the delayed counterparty in this case, signs and keeps checking. And then finally, when I sign, it synchronizes that. So there's a lot of detail, but it sort of shows there's a few different ways that we can handle it within the system in a very robust manner.
Yeah, and these are things that, the degens, as I generally call them, they just don't even think about. It's just kind of like, nope, it's going to execute, and everything has to be, instantaneous. Whereas 3 hours is not a long time in the TradFi world. Like that's, that would be considered like, hey, it doesn't have to be instantaneous. There should be a little bit of spacing here in some cases. So I like the concept of that. I'm sure it's here, but auditing, being able to provide audits and everything else, I'm sure that's all in here because generally what I see is something that is not going to be for the current crypto natives. This is to help onboard, the billion plus people that need or should be using, working their way towards blockchain technology. So, being able to provide those audits, being able to provide something that looks clear, because these are incredibly complex transactions. And so, when there's white collar crime, like what happened with FTX and everything else, it's the blockchain's easy. It shows you exactly what happened, but those kind of details, it looks like is what you're showing us here right now.
Yeah. So in addition to, so this, for example, is our loan module. So for an institution that's making loans or is a borrower, for example, a mining institution that is using loans to kind of process their everyday working capital operations, extremely helpful kind of tooling around, okay, this is how much I've borrowed, this is how much I posted on collateral. So this is summary reporting. This is more for business KPIs around lending and borrowing. This screen would also break down the at-risk collateral, and so when margin calls are potentially in order for anybody who's lending, anyone who's borrowing. We have some of the larger lenders in the space, and happy to go into the lending and borrowing markets, because one of the things Membrane does exceedingly well is manage and connect lenders and borrowers together through our lending module. And just if we tie that back into the settlements, every loan that you make in the system, all of the principal disbursements, all of the associated collateral movements associated with that loan, all of the interest payments, they're being automatically calculated based on pre-specified loan details that the users both mutually agree to, or they can just be your books and records. But all of that flows into the settlement system, and you can ultimately settle those. So there's no distance between a trade being booked and the trade details and the actual money movements. And then down here, to more directly answer your question, is requesting a report where automated reporting or manually pulled reporting, based on your specifications in terms of what the report type looks like. And all of this was driven by customer demand. And many people have looked at this, particularly Asian-based lenders that have said, oh, wow, this for the local regulatory bodies, this could be extremely valuable for us to be able to submit reports to them on an automated basis or on a bespoke basis, to be able to have a fully detailed audit effectively of our entire, whether it be spot trading book, whether it be our lending book, or whether it be our derivatives book. All of this is easily able to be passed along. Folks have found that very valuable. The other thing we do, and again, this is why sometimes it's hard to explain Membrane, because it's vast in terms of the feature set it has, is the automated notifications around when a trade is settled, when a trade recap needs to be sent, margin calls, collateral refunds, liquidations, and any settlement that takes place. So oftentimes institutions, and this is what we were talking about, the cost that's required to build the reporting requirements that you typically need in order to enter into the space, and the automation around trade recaps and recaps on settlements and the notifications of margin calls, and being able to customize that for what your business needs, that's very expensive and not really at the top of the to build list for many of these institutions. And so it all comes kind of nicely in a box through Membrane, and is something that our customers have really valued.
Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Beyond Enterprises, the ultimate 360-degree partner for companies ready to embrace the power of blockchain in their business strategies. Beyond Enterprises stands out as a beacon of expertise with a blockchain-agnostic approach that has seen successful projects on Ethereum, EOS, and Arc. Guided by blockchain thought leaders and fueled by inspired advisors, the team has played a pivotal role in over 40 successful ventures spanning token generation events, security token offerings, exchanges, and more. From healthcare to travel, finance, and beyond, Beyond Enterprises has left a massive mark on diverse industries. Elevate your business strategy today with pioneers of blockchain integrations, Beyond Enterprises, trusted 360 partner.
Yeah, just pulling up for 1 second from kind of product and operations, I guess, of Des. The reason that this is so important that James was just going through here is if you kind of go back and you look at the Three Arrows cascade that kind of wiped out every lender in the space, they generally were doing either uncollateralized lending just because they didn't have the infrastructure even to receive, maintain, and track collateral against their loans. So that is obvious why that would blow up. But then second, even those that did collateralize lending, they generally weren't tracking the LTV in real time, and most of them weren't making, we've seen the spreadsheets that they were using, and it was an analyst's job to update the price feed, right, on these volatile assets, and then issue margin calls. And there was no kind of rhyme or reason. So all this that James just went through, it might sound like kind of boring middle office, back office operational stuff. It's incredibly important because this is sort of what when I mentioned kind of the crypto industry needs to move towards a new model and go to the future. This is how you make sure that all of the disasters that we've seen over the last couple of years don't happen in terms of these cascades going across the street.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm seeing here, and again, my background is a little bit of institutional finance, having a startup in the space, but more so just heavy like retail, heavy international trade and whatnot, like. Cryptocurrencies, that's cute, whatever the case is. Like we all, kind of know that real world assets are coming. And so what I'm seeing here is the first UI that I've ever seen that actually would facilitate, real world asset trading. Which is going to be very different than the unis and the Aves and everything else, because it's a very specific asset. There's specific terms for it. So you want to buy a John Deere tractor, and in the future that's being done over on blockchain. You're not going to do with a buy, sell, and whatever the case is. Like there's a lot of implications that you guys have here. The other thing that I just in this very quick demo, and I want you guys to keep going on it, but I did recognize is potentially the death of the omnibus accounts. It's a term that you guys are probably, can educate the audience on a little bit more, but with what you're showing here, the reasons, and there's a lot of reasons to not have omnibus accounts, but suddenly it doesn't make sense anymore, especially with the granularity that I'm seeing you guys able to do across banks, across accounts, that having one massive account with, billions or sometimes, hundreds of billions of dollars is stupid.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that, we're, and Carson and Jay, you both mentioned this is the level of transparency that now both borrowers and lenders have. I'm drilling down into a loan ticket, assuming that I'm, a lender in this example, and I can select all the various intricacies around, this particular loan. And so in this example, we can create what we call a collateral arrangement, which is the ability to actually predefine the terms around which you're willing to lend. So for example, if you're a lender of Bitcoin and you only want to take stablecoin as collateral, that's something that not only can Membrane kind of articulate the details, but because you can link wherever that collateral is held, and that can be a tri-party account that's held at one of our custody partners, all of that can be observed by both sides. So you can feel comfortable that all of your collateral that you've posted, you can actually see it on a real-time basis. And it's not kind of, we know sometimes miners can get skittish when you mentioned the omnibus account. If you are posting Bitcoin as collateral and it's being lumped into a broader group of collateral that then gets rehypothecated and lent out again, you can all of a sudden lose the chain of custody. But here, with the ability to actually drill down and see the actual collateral and see it in an account and monitor it in real time, that's a very interesting development that we've been able to create for folks. And so, here in this example, this is an example where this collateral arrangement is only willing to accept Bitcoin, ETH, and USDC as assets, and you can set haircuts around those individual assets to make sure that, they're being taken into account accordingly, according to your risk methodology that you have locally. And then you can set all sorts of specificity around the day count accrual and when interest is paid, and so on and so forth. And so what ends up happening is that this is an example of a collateral arrangement where I have made a loan, and the assets, as you can see here, are sitting in, hang on, let me get a better example for everyone. Something a bit more tangible. Yes, here's an example of an asset. This is a loan that's been made. So I can see that there's a loan associated with this collateral arrangement where I've lent out a small amount of USDC, and that is being backed by assets that are held in collateral, in a collateral account at Fireblocks, or held in an account in a MetaMask account, or it's held in a holding account if I just wanted to kind of make reference to the assets that are there. And so you have the ability to now have full visibility into your collateral, and be able to get notifications when the collateral starts moving, to be able to, top up if you're a lender, if you want your counterparty to top up. And then here we monitor the health. And you can see here right now, actually, the borrower is actually due a refund of collateral because it's over collateralized to the tune of 600%. And you can see down here all of the associated flow of funds that are with this particular arrangement. So here, there's a past due refund, which we're acknowledging up top. There was an initial margin call that was paid. And then these are the payments that have gone in and out of this collateral account. Whereas you can see there's been a top up of a certain amount of USDC as well as Bitcoin. And so now finally, had this been in place during the lending heydays pre-FTX and pre-Three Arrows, you can see how this might be marginally superior to running on a Google Sheet. Sorry, that was a bit of sarcasm, but you can see the level of risk management and kind of thought that went into, okay, if you really want to create healthy, functioning lending markets, this would be at the core of what we would hope folks would use. And then taking it one step further, envision a world where treasuries are represented as assets on a public blockchain, and other more liquid collateral like equities, for example. And now those assets are being represented in Membrane, tracked, monitored, and the like. And so you can see this where the evolution is going. But first, you need the core building blocks that we believe we've built to be able to facilitate those transactions and create highly functioning markets.
And one other note, just to add on there, that collateral arrangement system actually plugs in or pulls from both the lending module and the derivatives module. So you can open up a basket of collateral or collateral arrangement with 6 different assets associated with the accounts, like James was saying, haircut each accordingly, and then against that, book one or multiple loans, or one or multiple derivatives positions, or get into really complex financial instruments where you have derivatives tied with loans. And so these are, again, institutional grade tools, not only for crypto as it exists today, but also as big players from Wall Street enter, they're going to look for this type of infrastructure in order to run their operations.
Yeah, we've actually been told by some traditional finance credit funds that this would be marvelous to have in their traditional financial world. We should have mentioned earlier that we also previously had supported Silvergate's Exchange Network, Send Network, as well as Signet, or Signature Bank's network. May they rest in peace. But now we're plugged into Customers Bank, or CBIT, and so as fiat rails start popping up, we can support the movement of fiat assets. And so you can see very quickly how regular fiat loans can be represented in the system as well.
The what comes to mind is an old saying, time kills deals. And, what I'm seeing here is the tool to really directly attack that, that you're trying to get a deal done. It's important, it's urgent. And your complexity is irrelevant at this point. Design it what you want. But it kind of provides that UI UX of a surety. Carson, can you just run through it seems like every brokerage, regardless if they're crypto or not, this is exactly what a brokerage would need. But can you walk through the top kind of high level users that desperately have been using and asking for those tools?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit it on the head. Brokerage, prime brokers, especially need this software. We often call ourselves sort of um, prime software or prime brokerage tech here. In terms of you're seeing a number within the space of primes and also primes of primes. They're kind of aggregating those within the crypto space, but also trading desks, whether they're predominantly kind of an OTC spot or derivatives, lending desks or market makers that do a lot of borrowing because obviously using the lending and collateral management technology, you need them on the lender and borrower side. We're also seeing ECNs pop up. So we kind of think of this as it's an interesting kind of B2B flow for us where they have some sort of a settlement process that needs to be managed. They're not netting and settlement experts. They're focused on compliance and knowing their customers and order book management, and then all of the downstream details post execution then can flow through into Membrane, and they can unlock interesting sort of hybrid models where we're bring your own custody models to their exchange. So that gives you kind of a good overview of a number of our types. James, any other client ones you'd want to throw in the mix?
Yeah, we think, so first of all, as he mentioned, prime, so lending desk, but also we believe that the custodians, would greatly value this as custody fees kind of dwindle and they're looking for more services, angles, and elements. We believe that, ultimately, our hope is that they become larger customers where, potentially if they get the right capital base, they could turn back into lending desks, or, they could actually rehypothecate securities, and everything that we've built. Securities, not in the strict sense of the word, but rehypothecate the assets, digital assets. So we believe that having a services angle where now all of a sudden, if they're offering tri-party accounts, now you have services on top of that where you can match buyers and sellers and you can match derivatives counterparties. We think all of that's, highly relevant going forward.
Yeah, so it's a really good point that James makes, because the custodians sort of seem to be turning into primes, and that they understand that the margins are being squeezed in the custody business, so they want to layer on all this transactional based lending, derivatives, trading, really prime activity on top, which makes a ton of sense from their perspective, and that's something where Membrane Tech slots right in. We're having a lot of good success there right now as well.
Let's talk about, so at this point, there's probably a bunch of people watching that are like, yep, sold, got it. What's the pricing model? What's the I'm sure there's a lot of like single people, single traders or individual pro level people that would love to utilize something like this. But who's it designed for, and how's it priced?
I'll just say, kind of to kick things off, we have a few different user types as we just sort of covered. So, as you can imagine, certain desks that use this day in, day out are much more open to SaaS fees. So we do things sometimes as tiered SaaS fees, or we'll do things based on sort of settlement volumes and overall lending volumes as well. Lending volumes booked into the platform and often kind of mix therein. James, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say one of the kind of things that's both been a blessing and a curse is that we kind of meet people where they are. So, for example, when the lending markets were in the doldrums and not many people were doing anything, we're happy to provide the service on a transaction basis. So, basis points on volume as a means of kind of pay as you go. But, for some folks that want operational leverage and want this to be more of a fixed cost and they don't want it to be as much of a variable cost, we're happy to look at kind of tiered SaaS where, you can scale your business and kind of get margin expansion without us kind of taking, more meat off the bone. So we're trying to meet folks kind of where they are.
That's amazing. And then let's dive into what the CTOs and CIOs are going to ask for. Security. You guys are potentially moving, in a few years, trillions of dollars. Lots and lots of things occurring here. So as far as Membrane, just talk about how you guys have hardened and secured, and then in the same kind of question, what you're expecting the other side that really needs to do to manage their end as well.
Mm-hmm. Security is incredibly important, as you're pointing out. It's something that we've had as a priority sort of since day one. So we do pretty continuous penetration testing. We're also SOC 2, type 1 and type 2. We have a CISO who thinks about these things kind of all day, every day. And importantly, in our database, so getting kind of a little into the weeds here, a lot of it has to do with encryption and storage of those addresses, because we never touch the private keys. I should start by saying that, right? I mentioned before, it always goes to the custodian or the wallet, so that sort of wipes out a whole litany of concerns and potential issues. But you still have okay, great. How do we make sure that if Jay puts his public address into his address book for sending, that somehow doesn't get corrupted or changed. And so for that, and this would probably be a whole call that we could go through the tech of how this works, but we effectively run a blockchain or distributed ledger of sorts within our stack that can ensure that the only way it can ever be updated is through sort of this cryptographic process. And so you can actually prove out that anything that has been entered in by the users into our database is still what they entered into the database. It's pretty cool. So, can go deep on that at any point in the future and bring some of the people more from the tech side. But suffice to say, like we're very focused on that, and that's probably the single biggest, outside of just developing the product, the single biggest focus of Membrane.
And I think this is just one of those, like, look, I love Web3. This is what I do all day long. But you have a dedicated person and dedicated people inside your team that this is all that they think about, correct?
Yes, correct. Yep.
As novel as that sounds, that's not a lot of the way that Web3 works. They just go, yep, it's, there you go. And we ran an AI bot and it says it's fine. Yep. So I really appreciate that answer, because it's one of those things that, the reputation matters. I do believe that the blockchain is going to win. And there will be that kind of, awakening moment where it all moves. But today I don't view it as a safer system. It's more immutable. It's more transparent. But there's still the human element involved that screws things up quite often. As we kind of bring it towards a close, I just really want to understand, like, what was the biggest learnings from this project? Our audience, again, is a lot of business development, kind of international trade, that kind of stuff. But like, when you started this and said, hey, we want to make, an OTC, which is, I think, very early on when we first talked, Carson. But this is very different than what you guys have built today. So what was the biggest learnings for both of you guys through this process?
Sure, I'll start off. So I think, as you saw when James was going through there, and that could have been a 3-hour demo, you saw how much complexity is there. I would say details very much, when you're building an institutional B2B product like this, details really matter. And what I mean by that is, when we first started, and as you mentioned, Jay, probably the first time you saw the product, it was, all right, netting and settlement for OTC. Like, that was kind of the thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think
done.
Yep, exactly. And that's great. All this still builds on top of that. Like, we still utilize all of that. But what we realized was that it's really all about this sort of holistic operations or workflow management for your users. So you need to go talk to the desk. You need to understand, put yourself directly in the shoes, and including hiring people, as James and I can attest. On the team, we hired people, that sat at the lending desk. That's been incredibly invaluable to understand how people that deal with the operations of collateral management, lending activity, derivatives, really need to get into all of those details, because if you have the best technology and operations management, but you miss something that sort of connects the dots back to how these transactions get booked, or how the finance team looks at these things and how they want to have reporting, you really need to have those details in there, because when you're dealing with an institution, unlike when you're dealing with retail and you have one person that needs to make the decision, you have to have 8 people there that all sort of get by. And so that's maybe the first one I'd say. James, how about you?
Yeah, I think mine's, I'll call it less technical and just more high level, which is, the learnings that I've had are more that, to be a successful startup or enterprise, it all boils down to the people. And so, as you mentioned, Jay, like in the beginning, Membrane is definitely not what we originally set out to be, versus what it is today. And I think that all has to do with having people around you that can wake up every day and be optimistic, can wake up every day and be agile and nimble. And, as you're facing, it wasn't the easiest sell on day one. And that was, not every day is sunny and the sun's shining there. You have to pivot. You have to be able to wake up and say, okay, this isn't working. But as long as you're testing all the time, you're making small decisions, and then ultimately you're building on top of that. And I think having the right people around you has been kind of the biggest thing for me, which is, do you want to be in the trenches every day with these people, and can we solve these problems and look at it in that way? I think with a more fixed mindset and a mindset that, hey, this is where we're going and this is the way that it needs to be, I think it would be far different outcome than what we've built. So that, I know it's cliche, but it really is true.
It's generally about the team, and I think what's most important that I like that gives me a little of this is that it's there's some gray hairs in the room. There's experience, because too often we see people come out with products of which they have no idea the industry of which they're about to serve, and I think that's what we have with crypto wallets today. It's binary. It's on or it's off. You either have full access or you don't. And so what you guys talked about of having front, back, and compliance all built into kind of this UI and being able to separate that, like that's still like just barely entering, kind of institutional grade, versus all these approvals. And I'm sure it's going to get more complicated from here, and I'm sure it's going to grow. And as you get into the larger institutions, they're going to have more requirements, and you guys seem to be more than happy to do that. But to me, this is the first time I've seen a UI UX that truly does seem to push those boundaries of the blockchain's almost irrelevant at this point. We're just trying to make sure that everything flows correctly, and you don't have to know what a smart contract is.
Yes, appreciate that. That's definitely what we're striving for here. So.
Well, you got it. As we bring it towards close, just again, how can people, if they want to learn more, they want to use it, they want to demo it, they want to understand, we'll put it all in the show notes and whatnot, but really kind of walk through the process, because is it an open beta or what's the story?
Yeah, so they can go to membranelabs.com to learn more, but we'd also love to have, we can post some of the information on how to reach out directly to us. So okay. It's actually already out in the wild. We have, I believe, 41 institutions live now on it, and always improving kind of every week, every couple of weeks here, because we get all these requests from our user base, from our clients. But so if anyone's sitting there either as an institutional trader, lender, et cetera, either because they have an entity or just because they're sort of scaled up, we'd love to chat with them, show us what we can do, and see how we can work together.
Fabulous. Gentlemen, I really appreciate the time today. It's been a lot to learn about. I'm sure there's going to be follow-ups that we're going to have as we kind of just head out and whatnot. What's the biggest item that's on the roadmap that you guys like? It's not going to happen this quarter. It's not going to happen next quarter, but like a 25 goal. What's one of these big things that just can really going to be the big differentiator for you guys?
So I think there is a huge opportunity to really expand our settlement network into a cross-custody collateral margin management system that runs the entire industry. So I think we're just starting to, we have all of the foundations laid for that, but now building those inroads and connectivity into the various tri-party and ACA account control agreement setups that the various custodians have. I think the custodians are ready for this. In other words, in the past, a lot of times you get competitors like custodians where they're very isolated. All of them seem to realize that they want to go to more of this transactional based model. And Membrane really can be the settlement network or glue that connects all that and enables collateral management and margin management at scale for lending and derivatives and really all OTC activity at scale. So that's something where a ton of my focus is. I also think that just finally enabling the OTC lending and derivatives market to flourish within the space, which right now it's a small fraction of what it can be. That's really where I'm focused at a kind of ecosystem level with Membrane and what we can accomplish over the next year or two.
Exciting. Thank you so much for your time, Y Whales. This is Membrane, and we will see you guys next time. Take care.